I hope I hope the fact that we have fewer people each successive session isn't a bad thing. Um, but hopefully we got a few more people pop in here in a little bit and get to join us. But hey, everybody, how's everybody's week?
Great.
You guys all
Finger.
see my screen okay? Anybody do anything fun for Thanksgiving?
Friendsgiving.
No?
Friendsgiving here in the city.
The
Friendsgiving
busiest
is
time
good.
of my year.
Friendsgiving is fun. It's fun to be around friends. It's fun to be around family. Football was not so exciting this year, but that's okay. All right, so let's get into it. We are here. It is day 3 of 4. Next week's our last one. That doesn't mean we have to say goodbye to each other. Still here to help you guys beyond that. But today is all about processes and data. This is where we start to get really, really practical within our business, and we start to think about what are the things that we do, whether we're a solopreneur, whether we're multiple people in our organization. What are the things that we do repeatedly in our business that we can do more consistently? And how do we start to get those things happening more consistently so that we can grow and scale our businesses? So it's a very, very practical session today. Today is going to be a little bit more of a workshop type of session as well. We're going to do some work together, and hopefully we get some good participation going, and you guys will be able to share some stuff with the team. So again, let's look at the review of what we've done so far. So week 1, we talked about vision and goals. Week 2 is the right people in the right seats. Today's all about processes and data. And next week, we're going to focus back into marketing to your customers and really sales and growing your business from a revenue perspective. But today, when we talk about processes and agenda, we have processes and scorecard. Our agenda is as follows. First, we're going to spend a little bit of time quickly reviewing sessions 1 and 2. I always like to say you have to say something 7 times before somebody hears it the first time. So if you're a leader and you have people who work for you and you feel like you're explaining yourself over and over and over again, 3-4 times to somebody, you should actually be happy because you're halfway there. You still got a few more to go. So we're going to reinforce some of those concepts from the first 2 sessions. That's going to be the first few minutes of the session. Then we're going to talk a little bit more about when we say process, what do we actually mean by that? So what is a process? We want to make sure that our processes are being used and being followed consistently. We're going to actually do a little bit of an activity together where every single person on this session today will be able to build a process in 5 minutes. Usually I do this in 10 to 15 minutes, but I think we can get pretty far in 5 minutes and give you guys some good skills that you could take beyond today. We're going to spend a little bit more time talking about the scorecard. That's how we're going to measure that these processes are working and measure the health of our business on a weekly basis. And then whatever time we have left at the end, we will use for that vaunted Q&A time to get your questions answered. But what I will say is just like with the last two sessions, anybody has any questions at any point in time over the course of this, just chime in, raise your hand, call out. We don't have to be too formal. All right. Sounds good. All right, so let's try to make this a little interactive. So we talked about in session 1, we talked about the EOS model, and we talked about the vision component. We talked about the vision is who we are as a company, where we're going, what it's going to take to get there. We talked about the people component. Today we're going to focus in on that data component and talking about scorecards, issues we might come back to at a later date. We have the process component. That's how we exponentially grow our organizations, and then there's the traction component, which is how we do the things we need to do to make that vision a reality. That is the EOS model. And our goal, if you remember, was to get us to what percent? 80%, right? If we can get to 80% strong in each of these 6 components of the business, that's where we're going to start to see things building in our business. We're going to start to see the growth. So we want to get to a floor of 80% in each of these 6 areas of the business. When we talked about that vision component in session 1, we talked about the concept of the 8 questions. Right? So hopefully by now, most of you have spent some time answering those questions for your business. Those questions, if you remember, on that document called the VTO, right? And we've got our core values. Who can explain to me what core values are? Come on, somebody's got to know the answer. Levi, you just talked about it.
Yeah, I figured I would stay quiet since I just spoke about it.
I just put you on the spot, so you're not quite the quiet one.
There are values that your business holds that aren't permission to play. They're not aspirational. And you use them for dealing with all the issues that you have.
That's right. That's right. This is the intentional culture that we're trying to build in our business, right? If our business is a bus and we want to bring a whole bunch of people onto that bus with us, whether they be vendors, whether they be 1099s, direct employees, or even customers. We want to put them through this filter of our core values. Do these people make decisions the way that we make decisions? Do they process issues the same way? Do they behave the way that we want to make our organization behave? Because ultimately we use these core values to hire, fire, reward, and recognize employees throughout our organization. We move in then to the core focus. The core focus is our sweet spot of our organization, right? We've got two parts to that. We've got our purpose and our niche. Can somebody explain to me what those two things do for us?
They
Even
help
if
us
it's a guess.
They help us differentiate ourselves within the various markets that we're working in and the industries that we work in. That's the niche that we address. It's what do we do? What do we solve? And then the core purpose is sort of that drive and that passion or that goal that we're trying to achieve with our idea.
Yep. Very good. Well said. I like to say that the purpose, the cause, the passion, that's the why, right? That's why your business exists. It's because you're trying to cure some evil in the world, right some wrong, do more of the thing that you love doing in the world. And that's why we start businesses, because of that purpose, or at least the best businesses. And then the niche is the specific product or service that we offer to manifest that into the world. So this core focus becomes the sweet spot for our company. And we get to use this to evaluate any opportunities that come our way, right? We get to say, okay, is this sharing, do we fulfill our purpose by doing this thing? Is this our niche? And we might still do some things, even if it's not directly tied to a purpose, or if it's not directly tied to our niche. We might make some decisions to do some of these things, but doing so, understanding that it's outside of our focus, right? Because when we have that sense of awareness, we know we have that we take the blinders off. We know what could go wrong. We know why it might not necessarily work out for us long term, but we're doing it with that full risk in mind, knowing that it's not what we specifically do. And maybe at some point in time, our niche evolves and we do start to do this, or the purpose of the business evolves and we start to make that more of what we do. Then we have our 10-year target. Somebody else maybe want to chime in and talk about what our 10-year target does for us? Eliyahu, we talked about that a little bit on the phone a couple of weeks ago. How do you describe what that 10-year target is?
It's the vision, kind of the final vision of the company you're building now. Like where exactly you want to be, where clients,
Right.
ideal clients are, and how much money you want to make, and what are you doing in the world? Like we change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we like to call it the big, hairy, audacious goal, the BHAG, right? This is that number one business objective that we have, that if we do all of this core focus work that's rooted in passion and purpose, and that's focused on the niche that we do, if we continuously do that work over and over and over again and grow and scale into 10 years from now, it could be anywhere from 5 to 30 years out. It needs to be far out. But this is that number one business goal that we're driving to. It's the GPS coordinates. So if we get knocked off track, we can always go back to that centering line, right? We talked about that bus driving to Alaska. If I decide to I'm in New York, so if I make a right turn and go up to North Dakota to go visit my uncle there, if he lives there, he doesn't really, I'm just saying, using it as an example, but we know that we need to get back to going on the right direction to head towards Alaska. We know that that's ultimately where we're going. It's going to be a little bit abstract. It's going to be something that's not so tangible, but it's the number one objective. Eliyahu, you want to share what you came up with, or what we were talking about for your 10-year target with your business, where you want to be?
Yeah. It's a lot. Okay. So the standard, want to be the standard of luxury. When somebody thinks about like a ring or a necklace or a bag, a luxury item, they think about our company. Every place where you can find today a luxury brand, so malls, streets like, I don't know, Fifth Avenue or any streets in the world. There's many streets, and also I think also the metaverse is huge. But yeah, 10 years,
Yeah. We had talked about also talking about like in 10 years from now, anywhere you could buy Louis Vuitton, you could buy
I wrote
we,
it.
right? So like that's like a, you know, like that's saying something, right? That means that we've already like established ourselves as a brand. People know who we are. They want our products. They're in high-end stores. They're with all the other high-end products. So that's painting that picture. It's setting that target that we want to be at that Louis Vuitton scale in 10 years from now, which is now going to give context to all the things we do in the short term. So then we have our marketing strategy, which is 4 parts, right? It's the target market. Who's our direct customer? Who should we be talking to demographically, geographically, psychographically? What's important to them? Where are they? What are the 3 things, the 3 uniques we're going to tell them why you should come to me and not Louis Vuitton, or why you should come to me and not your biggest competitor? We want to differentiate ourselves. We have a proven process that we want to be able to show visually illustrated to our potential customers of how we do business, how we operate, so that they know that we have expertise and that we're not practicing on them. And then in the case where we can, we want to have that guarantee, that closer, that anytime we talk to somebody who is a fit for our services, that takes all the risk out of the equation, that they have nothing to lose by giving it a shot. So that's a really effective marketing strategy. And when you stick to these things and put these things in front of your prospects, you're going to win business. Then we have that 3-year picture. I'm going to go a little quicker because I realize we're taking a little too long maybe in this recap, but the 3-year picture is what takes that 10-year target, right, that Eliyahu has of being in the same stores as Louis Vuitton and brings it a little closer to the ground. We want to create in our mind's eye that if that's where we're going to be in 10 years from now, where are we in 3 years from now? Right? What other brands are we competing with? How many locations are we in? What retailers are carrying us? What's our revenue? What's our profit? What's our SKU count? How many employees do we have? All those things are going to quantify how big this business is. And all the things that are going to help us describe and create that picture for what this business is going to look like is now going to help us do much more effective annual planning and quarterly planning, because now we know in much more detail where we need to be progress-wise towards those bigger goals. And then we move over to the second page of the VTO. Hold on, my mouse froze on me a little bit here. We move to our second page of the VTO, which is the traction page. And that's the here and now, right? That's the things that are happening this year. Why is this not loading so nicely? Hold on a second. The traction page has our 1-year plan. We're going to look at those same measurables that we have in the 3-year picture. We're going to set 3 to 7 goals for the current year, things that must happen to make us on track for that 3-year picture. And then we're going to move over to the rocks, which are the quarterly priorities, right? Once we have that clarity of this is where we need to be at the end of this year, every 90 days, we are going to decide what are the things that must get done these next 90 days, not the things that can be done or that should be done, but the things that we are going to focus on executing this quarter to make sure that we're on track for our vision. And then finally, the 8th question is our issues list, right? It's very hard for us to know where we're going without knowing what's potentially standing in our way. What other opportunities we need to talk about? Our issues are the things we need to discuss as a team. Those live on our vision as well, because we're going to have to deal with those things in order to accomplish all the things that we've set out, right? So that's when we talk about this VTO. Those are the 8 questions. I'm having a real technical difficulty here right now. And then the second part of the vision was making sure that that vision's shared by all, that we're, you know, actually like sharing this with the company, having a core values speech, that we're sharing the goals and the priorities with the entire company at a certain point, where everyone is rallying around the greater good of the business, shared by all. A great example is if in the 60s, if anybody ever walked around the NASA office, right? NASA, John F. Kennedy said we're going to the moon within the next 10 years. NASA had like 15,000 employees. Every single employee, you can go see the janitor in NASA's headquarters, and you ask them, what are you doing? Their answer would be, we're putting a man on the moon, even though he's the one claiming. So we want to have that degree of sharedness of our vision as a company. We want everybody in our business to understand where we're going and participate in that vision, right? And that's what 100% strong is going to look like in the vision component. And then real quickly, what we spoke about last week is that people component. And we talked about the concept of the right people, which are what? What are the right people for our organization? Right? These are the people that share our core values. My slides are not loading very well right now. I'm sorry. The way we measure that is on something called the People Analyzer, right? So that's the tool that we have once we know what our core values are and we started to talk about them and explain them to our people. Every single person in that organization, we're going to give them a score, a plus minus, or a minus, depending on how frequently they exhibit that behavior. If they're a minus, they're probably not the right person for this company. If they have too many plus minuses, they might not be the right person for this company. We get to decide the intentional culture that we're building. How many of these core values must somebody have to be considered the right person? And we get to measure that on the People Analyzer whenever we're thinking about our people. And then the next part of the right people, of the people component, is having the right seats, right? Which means what? What is the right seats? What's the tool that we use to define the seats? Does anybody remember?
Gets it once it has capacity for it.
That's part of it. That's the way we ask the questions once we have the seats defined. But the tool we specifically spoke about was that accountability chart, right? Which is that org chart on steroids, so to speak, which has your marketing, your sales, your operations, and your finance. We add the integrator. We add everybody in the organization has roles that they are specifically accountable for. We have our visionary, right? Our visionary is different from our integrator. Our visionary is forward thinking, big picture, big ideas, big relationships, maybe a little bit ADD, right? Our integrator is the person who's boots on the ground that's really, really involved in the day-to-day of the business, that helps clear out blockers and barriers that people may have, and helps all of those various departments work with each other. They're the person that's maybe a little bit OCD and really good at execution and accountability and exemplifies that. And when you have a strong visionary and a strong integrator that's driving that LMA in the business, right? Leading, showing where we need to go, managing, showing us how to do it, that's the rocket fuel for an organization that helps the organization go where it needs to go. Eventually you get to this, this giant org chart that has every single branch, every single person in the company, no matter what level they are, has extreme clarity as to what they do in this organization. And then I always like to show this. That was that performance values matrix, right? We have our stars. That's the right person in the right seat. We want that ultimate team, 100% of our people there. It might be utopia. Then we have our puppies, right? Those are the people that share our core values. We like them. They're the right person for this company, but maybe they don't struggle. They struggle in the role. Maybe they don't get their job or want their job or have the capacity. So that person, we can either train them to get them to be in the right seat, or we can move them into a different seat that maybe better suits their unique abilities. Those are our puppies. Then we've got our terrorists. That's the wrong person in the right seat. That's somebody who's really, really good at their job, hits all their numbers, but they're just absolutely miserable to work with. And they're going to hold you hostage, and they're going to disenfranchise your employees, and they're going to disenfranchise your customers, and they're going to create a whole bunch of collateral damage. And then we have our rats, which is the opposite of the stars. Those are the people that don't share our core values. They're not the right people. They're not good at their jobs. They don't GWC, get, want, and have the capacity for their seats. So they're in the wrong seat. And those people aren't performing or participating. We really don't want them in our organization, right? So that's really what we talked about with that right person, right seat concept, right? So now today we're going to focus in, and that's 100% strong. So today we're going to focus on process, okay? So here's where we're getting into some of the new stuff. And when we talk about the process component, the first discipline that we want to teach with process right off the top is we need to get our processes documented. Right. So before we start talking about how we're going to document them, I want to explain what that is. This is a guy named W.E. Deming. Anyone ever hear of him? He's a famous author and business theologist. He has a couple really, really good quotes about process that I'm bringing in here. The first one is, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. Right? Like, we have people who come to us, how do I do that? If they're in our organization or somebody that we're training, and if we can't explain to them how to do it, then we probably don't really know what we're doing ourselves. We're winging it to a degree. And then the other one is that a bad process will beat a good person every time, right? When you have a good person who's really, really the right person for the company, really, really wants to empower your organization, they do GWC their seat. But if they don't have good processes to fall back on it, to be consistent, it's going to ultimately lead to a lack of performance on their end as well, right? So we want to make sure that we're giving people that context and that ability to understand what's going on in our business. So when we talk about a process, if you remember, we talked last week about like what it means to be healthy, right? So I said one of the ways we can describe that is by looking at the opposite of what healthy is and what toxic is. So let's talk about what bad processes do. Before we talk about what a good process looks like, let's talk about this cost that there is of bad processes. What do bad processes do, right? So what we have to understand is that any issue we have in our business, it's either a people issue or a process issue. And those people and process related issues are the top opportunities we have. If we can improve our people or improve our processes, we can grow. We can turn weaknesses into strengths. But when we have poor processes, it's going to lead to dissatisfied customers, right? They're not getting that consistent experience working with you. They're not getting the deliverables that they're expecting. Steps are being skipped and they don't really enjoy that experience. So that's going to lead to potentially then a lack of repeat business, right? Customers, if they're not happy, they're not going to keep renewing their contracts. So when you have good processes and everything just happens seamlessly when they're working with you, they're going to want to come back and re-up. But if not, they won't, right? You're going to see a lot of employee turnover. Organizations that don't focus on process, a lot of the people that come into that company, they don't have the proper wherewithal to be trained. They don't understand how they can do their jobs the right way consistently. They don't understand necessarily what success looks like when they execute a task. So when that happens, they're not happy in a company. We want our employees to be happy. We want them to perform. We don't have to fire them. We don't want them to quit. We want to enable them, and processes will help prevent employee turnover. Of course, when we have good processes, we will, if we don't have good processes, we're going to waste a lot of time, money, any resource we have. We want to be doing things consistently. And if every time we do something, we have to figure it out all over again, we're going to be ending up spending a lot of time and money on things that we shouldn't be doing. So when we think about it, really, what does this all add up to? How do we quantify the cost of bad processes? It's really a massive number when you think about it, right? So now let's talk about like what a process is, right? And how we go about this documentation of processes, right? So the first step when we want to talk about processes is that we want to very, very simply identify the processes that we have in our organization, right? You want to look at your accountability chart. You want to look at all of the different seats in the roles, right? So if you have somebody in a sales seat in your organization, and that person is accountable for bringing in leads and sending out proposals and negotiating and closing contracts and going to trade shows and doing these things, actually, each of those things is a process that that person either runs or participates in. So our accountability chart is going to give us a very, very good idea as to what those processes in our organization may be, right? Every company has an HR process, a marketing process. We've got sales processes. Well, this is really acting wonky on me. Hold on a second. We have an operations 1 process. We have our operations 2 process. We've got our customer service process, accounting. These are just examples of the various processes that we may have. But once we have that list, seriously, just list out 6 to 10 core processes you have. Now we want to start to document them. But when we want to document them, I want you guys all to embrace this 20-80 rule. Has anyone ever heard of 20-80 rule before? Raise your hand if you have. They're applied in many different ways in business, right? Some people say you never want to have, 80% of your business coming from 20% of your clients, right? That means you have one really, really big client. If you lose them, it could really. When we're talking about a 20-80 rule here, when it comes to processes and documenting specifically, we want to understand what are 20% of the steps that are going to deliver 80% of the results, right? These processes aren't teaching somebody how to do their job. These processes are teaching them how we do that job in this business. If you hire somebody into finance and they don't know math, they don't know how to use Excel, the process isn't going to help them. And in many ways, the process helps other people in our organization understand how the various other components are working. So if I have somebody who's in sales, it's really important that they understand how our operations team delivers the product and services that they're going out selling to, right? It's important for our finance department to understand how we're selling and operating, because that's going to match up to our billing processes and models and reconciliations. So in a way, we want to document them for the people who are following them, but we want to document them for the people who need to know what else is going on in our organization. So we want to follow that 20-80 rule, right? 1-page processes. We're going to talk about it a little bit more, right? 20% of the steps. We want these processes to be visually illustrated and verbally illustrated. So we don't want it to just be a bunch of words on a page. We want there to be some graphics. We want it to be easy on the eyes, simplified in a way that people can see it. And on the right side of the page here, you see it a little bit of an example, right, for what an HR process can look like. And you see there's those 7 buttons. Those are all the steps, and then they go into them in various detail below. So this is a very, very thorough document. We're going to show you how this can work. And how we're going to actually all walk away from today with one of these for one of our processes, right? So once we've got those processes documented, we then want to, this is a guide, right? So at the beginning of any process, if you saw there was that sheet on the right, so how do we document the process? So when we start documenting the process, there's a few things that we need to answer, a few questions that we need to answer. The first question we have to understand very simply is, what's the purpose of this process, right? If there's a sales process, is the purpose to bring in new customers. If there's a lead gen process, it's to bring in new leads. If there's a finance process, it's to, handle our billing and our receivables and reconciling the month end. So these are all things that we need to state when we're looking at a process. We want our processes to almost act like, imagine a 6-year-old talking to a 6-year-old and they completely understand what they're talking about, right? So we want to do the same thing with our processes. So we very simply, even if it seems unnecessary, we want to tell the person who's viewing this process what the purpose of this process is. If it's an HR process, this is to hire the right people into the right seats when we need them, right? Then we need to know what triggers the process. Literally, what is the thing that kicks this process off? What's either the previous process that's been executed? What's the activity, the action, the thing that happens in our business that triggers this process to start? We want to understand that, as well. We want to answer that question. We want to understand what's the deliverable we're looking to accomplish. What is the satisfactory end result that if we follow this shipping process, 100% of our orders are being shipped out on the same day and all of our customers get their items the right way, right? If we're looking at a sales process and we follow this, the deliverable we're looking to achieve is that if we're following this process, we're going to close X dollars of business every single month, right? These processes, we want to be very clear about what done looks like, what effective execution of the process looks like. We also want to understand how we're going to measure that the process is working and being followed. That's going to come in on that scorecard, which we're going to talk about later. But if I am doing an HR process and I want to see if my HR process is working, I need to figure out ways to measure that. I want to see, for example, how many roles do I have open? How many roles haven't been filled yet? How many roles are in the final stage of interviews? How many new hires did we make in the last week? How many of our new hires didn't work out? Right? Things like that will help us understand if this process is working. And then we want to understand what's the handoff, right? Once I've hired that person, if I'm looking at the HR process, what happens next? Where does it go? What team handles the onboarding or whatever else is going to happen there, right? And then we also ultimately want to understand who is the owner of this process, literally who is accountable for its success, who's the one that's making sure that it's being followed, that the measurables are being hit, and that it's being tweaked and modified with time. So we want to be able to answer all of these questions. We're going to come back to this in a little bit. And then we've got,
Is the owner,
once we've got
is
that
the,
core, what were you saying? Please.
is the owner of the process a person or a position?
A person. Well, it's a seat. It's a very good question, right? It technically is a seat. If you have somebody in that seat, that person then owns it. If you don't have somebody in that seat, then obviously whoever else is taking over for the time being owns that. But yeah, if you have an HR process and you have HR person number one managing that process, and then they leave and they go to a different company and you bring in a new HR person, that old person's not managing the process. It's the new person. So it is the seat. Good question, right? So once we've got those 6 questions answered, the thing we need to then do is once we've got these processes, we've documented a process, schedule a workshop. All the people in your organization, the direct reports, the team members, you want to review this with them. You want to show them line by line how this is supposed to work so that they understand it. And then you want to focus on that measurable. You want to show them the specific metrics that might or might not be on a scorecard that are associated to these processes so that they know these need to be followed and they need to be followed well. We want to make sure that they're working, right? That measurable will be listed on our scorecard. Then the person who owns the process wants to test the process for a couple of weeks. Once we show everybody how it works and we have them using it, we want to enter into a little bit of a test phase. We want to understand that every process takes a little while to work. So spend 2-3 weeks carefully tracking that process, carefully tracking where it's not working, what is working, what's not working, why it's not working, because then what we ultimately want to do is schedule that final workshop to review the results and the real-time performance and make sure that we make whatever tweaks are necessary, right? If we see that a certain step in the process after 2 weeks either isn't adding value or we're not seeing the results that we need, let's make a modification. Just because we document it doesn't mean we're married to it. Doesn't mean that we have to be with the same steps forever. We want to actually have that. And then again, literally, once we've shared the final version, everybody on the team should sign off on that final draft so that they all agree to hold each other accountable to follow these roles. Everyone gets a copy. Everyone can access it. Now, this is the pen and paper version. Obviously, you can put all these processes onto some web-based platform. They have a lot of those types of tools. Whale is one. Trainual is another, where you could take these processes, put them into a file online, and when somebody starts, they go in and they actually have to take these, go through these processes and take tests. And that's another way to make sure that everyone's going through and reviewing these processes. But what we ultimately want to do is we want to make sure, again, that there's a number for each team member. If you're following a sales process, if you're following an HR process, we want to make sure that that team member who's following the process knows the numbers that they need to hit in that process every week so that we can measure performance on it, right? That's one of the main ways that we're going to make sure these processes are followed, by measuring them. Any questions so far? These slides are very wordy, and they're going to come back later when we do the exercise, because this is meant to be a reference that you guys can go back to, right? If you want to go back and document a process next week, the week after, come back, use this deck as a guide, right? But ultimately, once you have all of your processes documented, either online or it's in a book that has a table of contents with a list of all the processes, and everybody gets this on day one, every page, every process is on a page. They can go through it. It wants to be simplified so I can see all of the different simple processes that are here. And everybody kind of understands seamlessly, this is the people process, this is the sales process. They know where to find these processes, how to reference them. So once we document them, we want to put them into a document or a platform called Your Company Way, or whatever the other creative name you want to come up with it. But this is how we do business, right? We want to show all the people entering our organization, this is how we execute our functions. This is how we execute our roles. This is how we do business. So it's documenting them, identifying them, documenting them, and packaging them to make them accessible. That's the first two steps, right? So identify, document. The next step that we need to do after we've got them documented and we follow those 2080 principles is just like that vision. We want that vision shared by all. We want to make sure that these processes are followed by all, right? We talked about it a little bit, but how are we going to do that? Right? So how do we make sure that all of these processes that we spend so much time documenting are being followed consistently? So there's 4 things on our checklist, and we talked about a few of them already. Number 1, we need to train our people, right? We need to make sure that they know how these processes, where these processes are, how they work, give them the opportunity to make tweaks, give them the opportunity to ask questions and gain clarity, right? Sometimes somebody sees a process and they don't understand why they need an approval here, and they might start skipping it. If we can explain to them why that approval is necessary, it's going to help them understand the value of the step. It's going to help them follow the process better. We want to measure those processes. Again, like I said, if we want to see these processes be followed, I like to say what gets measured gets done, right? So we want to show them that, hey, there's going to be numbers that we're looking at every week in our meetings that are going to show us just how well we did with following these processes and how effective those processes are. We want to provide leadership, management, and accountability, right? We need to lead our employees. We need to show them this is the right thing to do. When we follow this process, this is the end result that happens. That's the leading part of it. Then there's the managing, which is when we see people are struggling in the process, when we see that they maybe aren't hitting their measurables, or maybe they are hitting their measurables, but they're confused. We want to show them the right ways to use these processes. That's the management. And we show them and we can explain to them why these processes are important, and they really connect with that concept and they understand them. Then you're going to see accountable employees. Then you're going to see employees who value these processes, who follow these processes, who are consistently doing things the right way in your organization. And then, like I talked about earlier, very important part of the process as well to make sure that these things are being followed is that we're updating them, right? If you have a process that is not being updated frequently, right, and it's outdated, people will stop following and using those processes, right? So we want to make sure that anytime our business changes or anytime there's a better way to do things, that we're making those updates and tweaks. Sometimes we need to look at our processes once a year. Sometimes we need to look at them once a quarter. Sometimes it's one process every month. Whatever works right for your business, but you definitely want to have that continuous improvement cycle in there. And again, today we're going to work on a process. I would encourage you, take some time in a week or two and look at it again, because chances are whatever you come up with today, there's probably a better version that you can come up with if you think about it a little bit more, but we have to be open to updating these processes, right? So if we train, measure, and lead and manage, and we have all of these processes documented, that's what 100% strong looks like in the process component. Any questions so far?
When you say document, do you mean using the 20-80% rule or eventually go into further detail?
Yeah, so good question. So 2080 is the guiding principle. If you give somebody a 500-page book on day one and you say, hey, read all these things, they're not going to read them. They're not going to understand. So you do want to focus on that 2080 rule. But every once in a while, one of those steps in that 2080 process might have its own sub-process, right? You know, if there's for example, like interviewing, right? Like if you're interviewing somebody and that's one of the steps, let's say it's step 4 or 5 in that HR process, you might have a sub-process for how you handle the interview, right? How it gets scheduled, what types of questions we ask, who's at the interview, what the recap looks like and the follow-up looks like and all those things. So you might have some of these processes blow up into sub-processes. And then the other thing is that you may have some procedures and checklists involved as well, right? Like there might be a step in the process. I talk about a client of mine had, they had their maintenance seat. They had somebody in the maintenance seat. This person is basically accountable for making sure that the office is clean, that it's closed down at the end of the day, that it's opened up in the morning, the alarm is set, and that like everything is stocked, right? And they were seeing that there was issues in the bathrooms. People would come in, the next day and the bathrooms weren't clean or there wasn't toilet paper there. So what they decided, well, the guy knows that he has to do all this and clean the bathroom before he locks down the office for the night. they came up with a checklist. Like, these are the 20 things that now when you go in to clean the bathroom and you do that step, make sure you clean the mirror, make sure you lift up the seat, make sure you reload the toilet paper, make sure there's soap in the dispenser. And it goes through and documents all those things. We've all probably seen them even in public restrooms. A lot of the times those exist. Sarah, did you have a question, or is it Sarah? I'm sorry. I see your hand is raised, but you're muted.
Yes, sorry. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Yep.
Okay, awesome. Sorry, I'm actually out doing my job right now. I own and operate a pet service. So my question is more in regards to if there's limited documentation, you've never done it before. I've been in business since before COVID or around COVID time. I started a pet service because that was the trend. Everyone was emptying the shelters instead of, popping babies out in the hospitals. So I started a business. It's going really great. I'm now at a moment of growth where I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing or where I'm doing, but documentation, I would need to understand what I need. What if you really have no idea what you need? You're not really reinventing the wheel or anything like that. It's pretty basic and service based. What do companies like me, what do? We started on the fly, in person. Everything's person central. Everything is regarding trust. Everything is about me. Marketing, I do in person. I speak to people in the park in person. They see me, they know me. I've been doing this for 6 years. What do people like me do?
Yeah. So the first, to put a general bow on it, it's setting up a clarity break, right? We want to make sure that we are setting time to work on our business and think about what these things are. Like, you just listed off 3 or 4 things that you're doing in your business: marketing, sales, etc. Right? Like, those are all, to a degree, processes. Now, maybe your process for marketing yourself in the park is a very simple one. It might only be 2 or 3 steps, but we want to make sure that we have those checks and balances. And again, if it's just you, it's one thing. If there's more people doing it, it's a completely different ballgame. But it's about gaining clarity, and it's really just about thinking about them. And it's also about not taking on too much, right? You're not going to be able to have all of your processes perfectly documented, especially if you're a relatively younger, smaller organization, sole contributors types of things. It's going to take a little while to get on top of all those things. And maybe these things aren't really done consistently right now, just quite yet. And we're not ready for it. So it's important to go step by step and figure out what are the most important processes to document that we need to scale, and we need to see those efficiencies. And with time, you'll get to the rest of them. So it is a little bit of a patience approach and a one at a time approach. But this exercise that we're going to do in a little bit is going to hopefully give you a little clarity as to how you can do this yourself as well. We're going to do it in a second. Okay? Give me a little blind faith on that one. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Sarah,
can I follow up with one more? Would that be okay? Yeah, sorry, I quickly raised my hand. In regards to that. So I'm in a position right now where I'm looking to bring someone on. I'm looking to scale. To be completely honest, I already burned myself out once. I have, to be completely honest, way too many clients, and I'm one person. I'm trying to keep up, and I'm really doing my best in that regard. I need to raise my prices, and I know that if somebody was in that kind of position where they just have too much business and they're barely keeping afloat, which area of documentation would be best over here to start with? So that's one of the biggest issues with hiring someone, is that I don't have my paperwork in order 100%. So to bring someone on is a liability. That's why I haven't done it up until now. And now I know that I need to grow, and I have a vision. I know I have a new audience that I want. I want the Jews, which is good. I'm starting to get in with them, and I live here in Crown Heights. So, so many unemployed, everyone's leaving. People, I do this, give me your dogs. It's basically what I say and where I'm at and how it works, because I have that reputation built already. So is today's exercise going to let us know where's the best place to start from?
So yes and no, right? Because as my job's not actually as a consultant, and I don't know your business that well at all, if at all, about how you do your business. So I wouldn't be able to tell you what the most important processes to document first are and where to focus. But I can ask some good questions. Like, I would ask you, what area of the business do you need the most help in? Like, what is the area of the business where you're really, really struggling with bandwidth the most?
Right.
Answer. What is that?
Oh, I didn't know I was supposed to answer you. I didn't want to take everybody's focus right now. I would say, just being me, that there's only one person. I have, as mentioned, too many needs, which is awesome. But I burn myself out. I'm one person, and I can only work so much. It was just Thanksgiving weekend. I had over 11
Yeah.
dogs that I was taking care of. So,
So
that's a lot for one person.
So even though you're only one person right now in your organization, you might benefit from doing that accountability chart exercise and at least gain clarity for what the roles should look like in your business, let's say in a year from now, even if it's 6 months from now, 12 months from now, and start to think about what the roles would look like. Because you don't really just want to bring in somebody who's doing all the same things you are, right? Like you want to delegate, you want to elevate, you want to have them handling certain things and you're going to handle certain things. So if we could start to define what those seats need to look like, ultimately those seats will help us define what the processes are. And then when we look at that critical seat, whether it be an operations seat, a sales seat, or a finance seat, just to keep things real simple, right? Now that we see, okay, I need help in operations and servicing my customers, that's really the area where I need to bring somebody in. So now think about what that person's role is and what you need them handling for you. And that should start to tell you what some of those processes are. Look at that accountability chart and the roles and the functions, and that's going to tell you a lot about what processes exist. And then whichever role you're hiring into first is probably the one that you're going to want to focus on first, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, good. So let's go through the exercise because I think you're going to gain a little bit of clarity through that. And the one thing that I'll tell anybody here, for like just like with previous weeks, Levi can attest to it, Eliyahu can attest to it. Like, call me. Like, I want to help you, right? So if you're going to go do some work on your accountability chart, work on some processes after today, shoot me an email, send me the process. I'm more than glad to review it, give you feedback, help you get unstuck. But we're going to do an exercise now. In the next 5 minutes, everybody on this call, is going to document a process. You ready? It's going to be intense. 5-minute activity. So I'm going to take you through it. If anybody's watching this recording, you have a little bit more time because you could pause the recording and wait a little longer. If we take a little more than 5 minutes, that's okay. We're a little bit ahead of track in terms of time right now, but let's start, right? So step one, I want everybody here. Does everybody have a pen or something they can write on, or a computer or something? If you don't, let me know. We'll give you a minute to grab something. If I'm not seeing any hands up or hearing anybody say, give me a minute, then I'm going to assume everybody's got some type of writing instrument. Okay. So what I want you guys to do, and I'll start the timer now, for the next 60 seconds, I want everybody to start thinking about, whether if you have an accountability chart, it's going to help, list as many of your core processes as possible. Spend 1 minute thinking about what are the things that I do in my business, that we do in our business on a daily basis and on a weekly basis, and just start to write those things down. I'm going to be quiet for a minute while you guys do that. Got 10 more seconds. All right, if you need a little bit more time, you can keep going while I ask this question, but I want everybody to just go into the chat, right? And at the very least, let us know how many processes you have on your list. So whether it be 3, 4, 5, 6, I just want to get a gauge for how many things you guys wrote down. And if you want to actually share what those are in the group chat as well, you could literally post what those processes are, because it might help inspire the team. They might not have been thinking about certain things that you are. So Ellie's got 3, Simma's got 2, okay? Again, this is in a minute. If you sit and think about it for 5 minutes, you'll probably think of a few others, right? We got 7 for Levi. All right, there we go. David's got 8. Good. So you really like your core process is usually in that 6 to 10 range. So you guys are right there. And again, with time, you're going to think about this more, right? If you schedule 15 minutes to think about this in a little bit more detail, you'll come up with more. Okay, so we're anywhere from 2 to 8 right now in our spectrum of how many processes. So now what I want you to do, now that you've got this list, I want you to pick one process And I want you to answer these 5 questions, 6 questions rather, right? And you can, the next page just has those details that we showed earlier, right? But now I want you to pick that process, right? So David, if you've got 8 processes, you could either randomly select one of them or select the one that you think is the most important one, right? Sarah, I would imagine that you probably have a little bit of an idea here now that you've got like 5 or 6 of these written down, which one might be the most pressing and the most important. Think about the things that are giving you the most issues in your business. Think about the process that you're having. And I want you to sit and write down on a piece of paper or type it in. I want you to answer what's the name of the purpose and what is its purpose? Why does this process exist? I want you to think about what the trigger for this process is going to be. What is the activity or event or process that finishes in my business that's going to start this, right? I want to understand deliverable. How do I know it's done, right? If this process is followed, what's the end result? I want to know how I'm going to measure that. And I want to understand where it goes next. And of course, I'm going to want to know who the owner is. That's not as much as an important one for today. The first 5 are really, really most important. So start for the next 3.5 minutes. Start writing down the answers to these questions, and let's see how far you can get. Of course, if you have questions as you're doing this, let me know.
Can I see the scorecard one more time
What about the scorecard?
for measurables?
We didn't really get to that yet.
Okay.
But we're going to talk about the scorecard after we're done with this activity. That's like the last few minutes. But the scorecard, when we talk about the scorecard, like I just want to understand, like if I have an HR process, what are the things that I need to measure to make sure that the process is being followed and is effective? So that's really all we need to know right now. What are, if I'm looking at a sales process, what am I going to measure? I'm going to see how many leads I got. I want to see how much revenue I brought in, what my closing percentage might be. Right. If I'm in a marketing seat, I want to understand how many new followers did I pick up this week? How many page views did I get? Did that meet my threshold? Because if I followed my process and did all the things I needed to do to market myself, to market my website, those numbers get hit. One more minute. Hopefully everyone's getting some progress and you should start to feel a little bit more comfortable. The goal of this activity isn't to really create a perfect process. It's to take away a little bit of the stigma of documenting processes. People think that to sit and document the process is a big, big lift. And for some processes, it might be. But really, if we can simplify things, it's going to give us a ton of clarity throughout the organization. If we could do this for 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, sit and just focus on processes, we're going to have incredible processes that are followed consistently. Did anybody get a chance to finish a process yet? Was anybody able to answer all the questions? I got Levi. Anybody else want to raise a hand? All right. So while you're all still working on it, Levi, I want you to share with us the process that you documented.
Okay. And then I actually got to run because I have a 3 o'clock meeting. But
sounds good.
So the email process I documented is creating a strategy for an email, a marketing email.
That's the purpose. Okay.
The purpose is to give creative direction for the email.
Mm-hmm.
The trigger is a client needs an email written, or there's something that needs to be done. The deliverable is an outline that for the copywriter, designer, and implementer to follow. And the measurables is how many questions is received by the creative team back on this, how many revisions the email goes through, and whether it accomplishes the goal set out in the strategy that they're creating. And then the handoff is it goes to the copywriter, and the person in charge of this is the email marketing strategist.
Fantastic. So now you just have to figure out now what are the steps, right? What are the steps that you have to execute from the time that it gets triggered till the time that you hit that handoff. So it's, get the request, review the request, right? Whatever those steps may be. And I actually probably should modify this because I skipped that part in this documented process. You have to add the steps of the process too. It's not just about answering the questions. We actually have to understand, like, how do I get from the trigger to the handoff? What are the 6 to 8 steps that we're going to follow in that process? But really, really good. That should give you some clarity in where you need to focus and what are the steps that you need to get to there. So I know some people got to go at the top of the hour. So we'll come back to this in the Q&A if anybody wants to talk about this a little bit more. But I want to get into scorecard. I want to do this real quick. Hopefully we can get Levi, hopefully you're listening in here. You'll catch the recording on this one. But let's talk about Oh, these are those instruction pages, by the way, and the examples. So it's all in the deck. So we've got this. All right. So let's talk about this data component. So we've got our data. Now we're going to talk about the data component. We're going to talk about our scorecards. We've mentioned scorecard a couple of times, right? We talked about one of the ways that we're going to make sure that our processes are followed by all is that we're going to have measurables on our scorecard. So I want you to think about our scorecard as a dashboard, right? We got a picture of an airplane, and I want you guys to think about this story. It's a story. It's not real, but imagine you're on an airplane and the pilot gets on. This is everybody. This is your captain speaking, and they say, "I got some good news and I got some bad news for you." Right. The good news, the bad news is that we've lost all electrical power in the cockpit. We don't know our altitude. We don't know how much fuel we have left. We don't know which direction we're flying in. Right. But the good news is it feels like we're making good time. Right. Like it feels like we're making good time because you were about to crash into the side of a mountain, maybe. So, the point here is that without our dashboards, without looking at the numbers, all we're operating on is guts. And we might feel like we're making progress. We might feel like we're making good pace. But really, there's a lot of things that are going on under the surface. So we want to make sure that we have a dashboard for our business. We want to make sure that each of our teams has a dashboard because ultimately this is going to help us understand, for our airplane or our business, what is our airspeed? What's our altitude? What's our fuel on board? The distance to our destination? We want to make sure that we have this information when we need it, where we need it. We want to make sure that we're being alerted when there's something not right. So think about your dashboard in your car, right? It's like 5 or 6 important pieces of information there, not that much else. You're not looking at every single bit of information. You want to see how fast you're going, your GPS, directions. You want to maybe know what song is on the radio, how much gas or electric you have left in your car. Right? Those are the only things you really need to know while you're driving to keep you focused on operating that car the right way. Same thing with an airplane, right? And then like the things like your tire pressure or check engine, those things aren't showing all the time, right? Those are happening when there's an issue, right? So we want to make sure that the right things are alerting us when there's an issue as well that we don't necessarily have to pay attention to until it becomes an issue. So that's the concept of what a scorecard needs to be for our business, right? And when we have a good, effective scorecard, there's basically 7 truths that I'm going to take you through. Right. And we have to believe and understand these to have an effective scorecard. And then I'll talk about technically what a scorecard is. On the right side of the page, you see some sample things that one might measure on a scorecard. But looking at the left side, the reason why we have a scorecard is we have to understand this concept of what gets measured gets done. Right? It's a famous story of Charles Schwab and the Bethlehem Steel Company, and they had a mill that wasn't performing well. And he goes in and he asks them how many heats of steel, that's the quantity they can produce a day. The guy says, I never really thought about it before, but maybe we could do 6. They were really underperforming. Charles Schwab, the COO, writes the number 6 with chalk on the wall and walks out and leaves. And then he comes back a couple weeks later, and the guy's like, you're not going to believe it. Ever since we put that number 6, we're doing 8. So then he goes and crosses out the 6 and writes an 8. Next week, they're doing 12, 16. And the point here is that once we start measuring what we can do, once we start telling ourselves, I have this in my own business, I need to have a certain amount of conversations a week. If I'm not measuring it, I'm not having those conversations. But on Thursday, if I see I'm short by 4, now I know I got to get this done. This is what I have to focus my energies on the rest of this week, getting those 4 more concerts, those 4 more. So what gets measured will get done. Our scorecards can also help us understand that managing metrics saves time. We're not just making decisions because it feels like things are good. We're looking at the numbers on a weekly basis, and we're understanding that the numbers actually are or are not good. So it's going to save us time. We're going to make better decisions. Our scorecard number 3 will give us a pulse and the ability to predict. We're going to look at those scorecards every single week. We're going to see patterns. We're going to see trends. We're going to understand what's happening when a number turns down. What's the number that goes up? And when the number goes up, what number goes down? And how do we get ourselves regulated? So you're going to have you're going to be able to predict what the business can do better when we're paying attention. We want to inspect what we expect. Charles Schwab had to come back to check. Right. So if we're going to tell these people, hey, I expect you in a sales role to bring in X revenue or X number of leads, we need to check on that to make sure that we're driving that accountability. Number 5 is you can have accountability in a culture that's high trust and healthy. Right. A lot of people think, hey, if we make this all about the numbers, it's very impersonal. It's not healthy to just keep checking on numbers. And actually, that's wrong. Accountable people love scorecards. Accountable people see that the scorecard is telling them exactly what they need to do to have a great week. So they're going to embrace that. They're going to measure it. They're going to do the things. And that helps build a more trusting and healthy environment, not the other way around. Number 6 is that a scorecard requires hard work, discipline, and consistency to manage, but it's worth it. Anything worth doing in life, anybody who's married knows that it's really, really hard, but it's worth doing. Raising kids, it's really hard. It's worth doing. Business is really, really hard, but it's worth doing. And managing your scorecard and paying attention to those numbers week in, week out is going to be difficult, but it's worth it. And then we also have to have one person in your organization that owns that scorecard, that's making sure that all the numbers are being fed every week. If you have two people accountable, then you're going to have an issue where that scorecard's not being filled out consistently. And when we look at the scorecard, there's 6 fundamentals. And we're going to show an example in a second. But we're going to review this weekly with our leadership team. And if you have a sales scorecard and a marketing scorecard and operations scorecard, every week in that team's meeting, you're looking at that scorecard. You're seeing, did we hit our numbers? Yes or no? Your scorecard is going to be 5 to 15 numbers, not too many, not too little. If we have too many numbers going on there, we're not sure which ones are the important ones. We're not going to be able to react well. We want to make sure that each of those numbers has an accountable owner. So while there's one person accountable for the whole scorecard, somebody's accountable for sales, somebody's accountable for operations, somebody's accountable for HR, and all the metrics we have to define who's going to be making sure that those numbers are hit every week. There has to be a goal every week. It's not just sell as much as we can. We need to sell at least X dollars. It's not, don't make this many mistakes in customer service. We can't make more than this number of mistakes. We have to have a specific goal. If we don't have a goal hit, we drop it down. We talk about it as an issue. We don't just talk about it on the spot when we're reviewing that scorecard. And then we want to have 13 weeks in a glance. That scorecard is going to have the last 13 weeks trailing leading up to it, so that we're able to effectively see those patterns and trends developing. We're looking at these numbers week in, week out. So when we have an effective scorecard, we look at an effective company scorecard, it's going to look something like this, right? We have those measurables: weekly revenue, cash balance, sales calls, meetings, proposals, all those things. There's an owner accountable for each one, so we know who's driving that number. There's a specific goal for each of those numbers. And now looking at the 13 weeks running history, I'm able to now see the trends. I could see that, in the middle of October, we had a little bit of a dip on revenue. I could see that we had an issue with accounts payable as a result of that in late September, early October. And we start to understand through these numbers how our business is operating. Right? Errors count. If we have more than 4 errors in a week, we're doing something wrong. So the fact that we're seeing that we're consistently under 4, that means we're doing things well, right? Utilization, capacity, all those types of things. That's telling us how well our business is performing. But that's what we want to get to. And ultimately, when we look at that accountability chart, we want to get it to a point where every team has a scorecard. So at the top, shaded in, is our leadership team. They're going to have their set of 5 to 15 numbers. Then you've got your marketing department, for example. They're going to have their 5 to 15 numbers. And every single department in the organization will have their own scorecards that we're running on data. And then what ultimately happens is that every seat, if we have a scorecard for every department, every seat then has 1 to 3 measurables that they know, these are my numbers. If I'm in a sales role, if I'm in any of these roles, if I'm in a finance role, these are the numbers. I have to make sure that our cash balance is always over this, and that we never have more than this dollars due to us after 60 days, et cetera. And when you've got scorecards at every layer and you've got measurables for every seat in your organization based on numbers, that's 100% strong in the data component. 3 o'clock on the nose, got through all the content, right? If there's any homework today, the homework is start doing that process documentation, start thinking about your scorecard and what are the metrics that you'd want to measure. What are the things that are meaningful on a weekly basis? I actually posted on my LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago a really good video on scorecard, which might be very, very helpful for you guys to read as well. But when you get a chance, scan the QR code. We didn't get any feedback last week, so I'd love to get some feedback this week. I want to know how we're doing, if we could do better for next week. Any improvements we can make in the next week would be great. But otherwise, before that, like, any questions? What do you guys have for me? I'm here to stick around for another 20 minutes, half hour, if that works for you. Feedback, comments, questions, anything. Sarah, do you feel like you're a little clearer now? You had some questions earlier.
Of course, that people pay for parking. So the triggering event, or alternative. Well, alternatively, I'll say, when a customer.
I think Rabbi Wordy, is that you?
Violating.
Is that David? Somebody's got sound coming through.
When a person comes to his parking lot
and
doesn't have any space.
Okay, I'll mute myself.
Oh, maybe that was him. All right. So, Sarah, what was your question again?
No, number one, I wanted to congratulate you guys. I think this is really cool. I've been living in Crown Heights for about 6 years now, and I think I've been following this organization and gone to a few of your events and taken part in a few things. This is really cool to watch you guys, advance and offer more and more things to our community over time. So, number one, Yasher Koch, it's really cool, and massive kudos. because there's a lot of us over here with small businesses who have no idea what we're doing, and we would love some guidance. So this is great. You're gonna hear I'm walking out to another client. I'm sorry. That's one of the things also I'm trying to figure out is my schedule with dog walking. It's last minute things come in and you put in extra fees, which is great, but you still got to go walk the dog yourself. So that is something to have another employee that would really be helpful in that regard. And you've given me a lot to think about, which is great. I know where my main concerns are in regards to this type of industry. It's very different than a lot of marketing industries and a lot of other very upfront ones like stores and such. This is more building trust with people and understanding that there's very clear expectations over here between the walker, the boarder, the sitter, and the client. So having some sort of documentation in that regard would be really helpful. Processes I need to figure out because I come from a processes background. I haven't yet figured out how to implement it into a dog business, but I am building out a website and hopefully going to utilize that for services and such. I guess I'm just really excited to understand how to use these resources and how to better connect with people in your organization. I would just also ask, I've asked this by email a few times, but do you have people in your organization who are specifically service business based centric type of people like this? You would think that this isn't such a niche market because it's New York City. But if you look at the Jewish world, it's a very niche market because Jews are only very recently starting to get more and more dogs. Usually they stayed away from dogs for a very long time. So I just thought, because there's a lot of people out here, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build a strong foundation over here and then mainly cater to the Jewish community. As somebody who is a Jew, understands everything, comes from this background, can respect kosher, can respect Evan Tevim, and is happy to come into your house, every dog and walk out the door.
Sarah, did you ever speak with Yehuda? I tried connecting you with Yehuda. Did you speak with him?
So he hasn't responded as of yet, which is okay, not a problem. We all have busy lives and we all have our own business.
No, I'll make sure. He's available, and this is what part of what he does. So I'll check with him. I believe he sent you an email, right?
I thought it was you. You're Mr. Yoshua or Rabbi. Sorry, I don't know who's who anymore. Yoshua Worthy?
Yes, but Yehuda, I made an intro to Yehuda, and as far as I recall, he responded to you.
Okay, so I have an insane schedule, and I must have missed it. I will go find that email right now and respond because I'm very serious about building my business. This is take two, seeing as the first time I completely burned myself out and I closed, but I'm back and I want to rebuild. So I will reach out to him.
Okay, awesome. Yes, we look forward.
And Sarah, just something that I heard also just in what you were saying, and it seems like you have a lot on your plate and there's a lot going on and maybe having some capacity issues. Time management is a process. I want to feed you that line a little bit, right? How you manage your time and how you block off yourself to protect your space to do the things you need to do both in the business and on the business is in a way a process, right? I know to run my business effectively, I need to do X number of hours of biz dev, X number of hours of teaching and facilitation, or in your case, walking dogs, sitting dogs, etc., and then X number of time, working on my business and improving processes. And if you could start to slot those in, and every Monday is this, every Tuesday is this, or 9 to 10 a.m. is this part of my day, 10 to 11. If you can create like a time management process for you, it might be a big unlock. And again, it's something not EOS related, but something that I could definitely help you with. So if you want to reach out to me, time management is something that I'm pretty good at for my German heritage.
Yes, absolutely. Because I know that is something that my ADHD really fails at.
It's tough. It's not easy for everybody. Eliyahu, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you. So in like new startups, in general, new businesses, so processes need to be created because, of course, like there is things that you're building, and it's always about building new processes for different things, also hiring new people, whatever, everything. So what do you think are the the key processes that a new company, a startup, needs to have in mind?
Well, let me ask you this question, right? You're a new business, you're a startup. What's the hardest part of your business right now?
Where I'm stuck. It's the next step. It's getting my product to stores, but to the right stores, not just regular stores, to like high-end stores, and making the connection with those high-end people, that they're not like, you don't walk on the street and you meet them and you can get a meeting with them.
Yeah. So you want to start to get a little methodical about like, hey, if I want to, by the end of this year or by the end of next year, be in X number of stores, right? Think about what the process that is probably your process, your biz dev process. So I have to identify a potential retailer, then I have to get them this information, and I have to have this conversation, and then check back and think about what are those steps. Now, if you remember from that first slide from W.E. Deming, if you can't explain what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. And it could very well be at this point, don't take this as an insult by any means. You're a startup. You might not know what you're doing yet, right?
Mhm.
Like you might not have gotten the flywheel going to the degree where I know exactly how I'm going to do this. But you want to pay attention to yourself, because as you start to have success, when you do land that first big retail account or the second big retail account, a third, now you're going to start to look at, okay, how did I do that? And how did I do the one before? Right. And start to look at those steps and repeat those over and over again. Right. I know I have a lot of the way that I do business is through connectors, right? And people in my network that can introduce me to people, right? That's how I do my business, is all based on referrals and word of mouth. And completely rebuilt the way that I deal with my connectors, right? I have a call that I make every month. I have a meeting that I'm hopefully doing after that. There's a recap. There's a list that I send them of people. And as I've started to learn how to do these things more and more effectively as I manage my process, it's become a lot more systematic for me, where it's not every time I talk to somebody, it's a different conversation. It's actually a very consistent process that I'm following to have a conversation with somebody who could introduce me to a lead. That makes sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
So you might not know what the process is today, but start to pay attention to some of those steps and start writing some of those things out and documenting them as you're doing them, because when they do work, you're going to want to repeat those, the ones that make sense to repeat.
Mm-hmm.
David, did you have a question?
Yeah, so
sure.
Adam, I
you
thought
screened one
that
up.
the session today and the past ones were very helpful. The one that I appreciated the most was the scorecard. I'm largely in sales and marketing, but the business I'm in is a custom business, and I've been in the business a while, first as in my own, and then now I represent other companies, but we fabricate custom cabinetry, millwork, glass, and metal, and we're always recreating the wheel. So the challenge is that it's a small business, or where the businesses are relatively small, and you have one person who might do several things. So it's very challenging to create like specific processes that get followed all the time, because everybody wears a lot of hats. That's not to say that we shouldn't have processes, but we'll close a deal, we'll get a big job, and there are so many facets and aspects to it: quoting it, doing samples, scheduling, doing mock-ups, getting approvals, approved drawings, approved samples. I'm beholden to the client to be ready for us. They never are, and then we always seem late because we waited for them and they were 8 weeks late. But when we get there, they say, well, I needed you 2 weeks ago. I said, yeah, but you're 8 weeks late. So that in and of itself is a very big challenge. But specifically in the process, or the steps to the process, I want to see how I can streamline what I do, utilize my time better, to go from kind of just shooting spaghetti or throwing spaghetti against the wall to being very targeted, And I think it deals with another use of that 80-20 rule, which is I've seen in my business, and it's probably 90-10. 90% of our business comes from 10% of our clients, and that's not necessarily a bad thing
Okay.
because we're in a specialized business. Anyway.
Okay. Yeah, again, that's not the doesn't mean it applies to everybody. It's a general thing that some businesses have, especially those that are looking to go for a critical mass, but it doesn't seem you're there. So there's lots to unpack there. But as far as first off, as far as the scorecard, thank you. Like, yeah, like these things, especially in a sales-driven culture, it's very, very easy to understand how the numbers drive all that. And the important thing is to pay attention not just to the lagging indicators and the revenue, but the leading indicators as well. Right, looking at the activities and the leads and the calls and all those types of things, that's going to help you understand that. But when you talk about that customer experience mapping, so to speak, is what it sounds like you're talking about, right? So I come from a little bit. Granted, it's not cabinetry and glass and things like that, but we built websites, and for many years I was a project manager before I started as an executive, and my job was to do just that. It was to understand what the client was looking to accomplish, right? Understand what their constraints are, both in terms of time and budget, right? And then take them through our process. So we do a design, we need an approval, and we have some time for revisions, and we need to have final approval by this date. And then we start going into this stage of development and the testing and this, and we would have a timeline depending on the type of project that we would give in the beginning. And it was usually a template. It was a template like, this is the general timeline that we use. These are the general steps we follow. But then the bigger project that had more customizations, maybe we would extend that one out a bit, that, the development cycle. Or if there was one that had a lot more custom design involved, maybe instead of it being 2-3 weeks in that project, it's going to be 5-6 weeks for that one. But it's about setting the expectations, right? So it sounds like you actually do have a process, right? Where you're gathering the specs, you're doing some type of mock-up design work, reviewing it and coming back to them. And if you could go into a meeting with a customer and show them what that experience is going to look like, that says, okay, from this time you sign this contract to go forward with our services, these are all the steps. This is what's going to happen. And if you miss this date, this is the implications. To be very upfront with them. Say, if we don't get this approval on September 1st, your site's not getting done in time, or this project's not going to get done in time. If we can give that to them before we even start, you're going to have a much more seamless relationship with that customer.
Well, that's exactly what I do. And
Good.
It's almost down to a science because I'm doing it 25 years, but it always blows up. It just always blows up. And I mean, it's part of the business. That's the delivery part of the business. And because we're so beholden in construction, if the client's renovating an entire building, or if we're doing finished, we're doing the kitchens, or we're doing the shower doors, or we're doing millwork, we're always waiting for 5 other trades ahead of us. So, and you try to be as on time and as responsive as possible, but you're so beholden to other things that the client is doing. But that notwithstanding, one of as a sales rep, or as I was just hired kind of as a consultant and a partner in the business to build sales, one of my biggest issues is that I could go out and see, let's say I can talk to 50 people a week. I call 25, I email a bunch, I go see person to person. So I could generate a lot of quote activity. The problem is estimating all those quotes, getting them to people on time. There's a I want to say a log jam, or there's a number at which you've got too much activity going into the quote pipeline. You're just not going to get it out in time. So, and you can't just hire estimators because they cost a lot of money.
That I'm very well aware of. But maybe they need a better process. Maybe it's the estimators need to get better at defining, like, these are the things you have to give me in order to get this estimate out effectively. To say I have everything I need to do, right? And it could be that you almost are their client, and they're going to set the expectations with you to a degree. But that estimating process and the interaction between sales to make sure that that's seamless and you don't have downtime and you're missing opportunities because it's taking you too long. I definitely can relate with that. And understand what that's like. And you have to balance it the right way because you want to be thorough, right? Like, you don't want there to be any surprises later when you get into the project. You want to make sure you uncover everything. But yeah, there's, you have your sales process, you have your operations process, and then maybe there is an estimating process. Maybe that's a critical function in your organization that, what do we need to do to submit for an estimate that can lead us to a satisfactory end result of a turnaround of an estimate in X time, right? Like we think about the trigger is we get the bid request or we get the proposal. The desired outcome is that we have an estimate that we can present to a customer within 7 days, right? The way we're going to measure it is how many estimates are in the pipeline that haven't been completed on time, right? Like, and there's so many different ways that we can look to see if that's happening. And if consistently every week we see that number of estimates in the pipeline that haven't been completed yet because they're stuck is there, we know that we have an issue now with our estimating, that they're not producing fast enough. And now that should open up for the conversation to figure out why that is. Is it that they're just lazy? Is it that they have capacity issues and there's too many estimates coming in and they don't have enough time in the day? Is it that they don't have a process and they're reinventing the wheel every time and it takes them 10 hours to do an estimate, which should only take them 2 hours to do an estimate? We want to have those open, honest discussions. Having the process will actually help if we can define what we want out of the process.
Okay. Thank you.
Helpful? No problem. Any other questions, folks?
Yeah,
Then
I do.
will.
If
Okay,
you have
cool.
a minute, if you have more time.
Yeah, I'm good.
I think I filled out, I'm working on class 1, so I filled out the VTO. I didn't fill out every detail, but I think I filled out as much as I can. Should I just email it to you if I want you to review it?
Sure.
So I will. Thank you so much.
No more than that. Yeah, fine. You can send me on WhatsApp, whatever's easier for you.
Okay, fine. Thanks a ton. It's very helpful.
No problem.
Adam,
No
where do
problem.
I get your info if I want to reach out to you offline?
Yes,
Say
It's
again?
on the deck. It's on the deck, but I'm gonna drop it in the chat right now also, so you have it.
When you say it's on the deck, what's on the screen right now? Or
Actually, right, the next page, actually, there's that event that I think it should be the Great Boss Workshop in a few weeks. December 23rd, if anybody wants to send their people, this is a great event. You'll learn a lot how to be a great leader. It's kosher, it's separate seating. And then the last page here, boom, there you go.
can you go back to the one that you just had?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
You got everything you need?
I think so.
Okay, yeah. Email, text, whatever. I'm here to help. And this
Thank
week's
you.
a little bit of a chill week, so I got plenty of time. So if you hit me up, I'm more than glad to help. Sarah, what else you got? How can I help you?
perfect. Hi, here I am. I didn't want to disturb everyone with walking. This is my life outdoors. So I actually wanted to, if you have a few minutes, just literally consult with you about my idea. My idea has been brewing in my mind, just because I know as a Jew who comes from a background, Ruminidin are getting more and more of dogs, which is good, amazing. They're really good for you. They're good for socializing. They teach the kids not to be afraid, which is awesome. But they don't know what to do with them, meaning that not necessarily all the owners fully trained in what it means to have a dog. And when they decide that they want to go away for young cousins, suddenly they like hit it and they're like, whoa, wait, what do I do? I don't know what to do. I don't know a lot of people who have dogs. And so I'm really doing my best to network and get my name out there. That this is what I do. I understand the background. I understand everything like it. I do human typing myself with, extras, which is the dogs. And I just wanted to hear from somebody who has a perspective of being in business longer than I have, because I'm kind of flying over here. Does that sound like a good idea? Does that sound like a good niche? I have the Yuppies, which is Baruch Hashem really great. I have the Karens, which is even better. And now I want the Jews.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a great idea, right? Like there's certainly that element of letting people into your house that you spoke about earlier. If you're looking for some advice as to how you can break into that market, figure out where these people are hanging out, right? Like if they're on Instagram, right? If these are like a bunch of Instagram moms or Facebook or whatever it is, then you need to be on Facebook. You need to be hanging out where they are and giving them some content, maybe giving them away some stuff for free, giving them tips on like, hey, this is what you do if you need to go away for the weekend, or, if you have to spend the whole day out of the house and you have a pet, what do you do? Right? Like give them some value. And if you start showing
Okay,
that,
and
you
if
become
I
known like,
if I royally and absolutely suck at social media and have like zero interest in doing it, yet understand it's a very important marketing tool?
You might not like this answer, but get good at it.
I'm working on it. The
Right?
good thing
Like,
is
at the
I
end of the
mastered
day-
the pictures. I know how to take really good pictures of dogs. Just
So make it photographic,
that's where
right? Like,
that's where the documentation comes in. I need permission from the owners first to go
Yeah.
use their dogs for
that's not too
marketing.
bad. That's not
And I don't have paperwork about that yet.
okay. So that's easy enough that you can get like a disclaimer online, LegalZoom, and you get something there to have them sign a release of some form. I bet you if you Googled like picture release form, they've got something that you can get them to sign very, very easily. And if you have good relationships with your people and you tell them, hey, listen, I'm trying to grow my business. I'm going to be doing some stuff on social media. I'd love to feature you. Show them that there's actually something in that for them. People like that. They like to be featured. Then
Yeah,
why the
so
heck
far
not?
it's all been
Right?
very positive feedback. Everyone said yes so far.
So there you go. Good. And you don't need that many people. You just need one or two, right? Like you could take that one piece of content and repurpose it in a whole bunch of different ways. Granted, I'm not social media guy, so I don't know this stuff too well, but from what I know with my business, getting out there on social media, posting, letting people understand who you are, what your personality is, the value add, and giving a little bit of value, giving away a little bit of what you do and the expertise you have is going to it's going to create true influence. People are going to look at you as a destination for when they need to know about how to take care of a dog. And then when they need to pay somebody, they're going to call you also.
Right. And I already specialize in the dogs that nobody wants to work with, the anxious ones and the reactive ones, because I started this during COVID and I specialize in COVID puppies.
So talk about that.
Puppies who have not been socialized. They're my specialty.
Talk about that, right? Think about, again, go back to that VTO exercise and think about who your target customer is, right? Demographically, psychographically, geographically, where they're located. Psychographic might be, hey, this person needs help with the type of dog that people don't typically get help with, right? That could be your psychographic profile is, I need people in the New York tri-state area that are above this income threshold that have this type of dog. And then just market to those people.
Right.
Next week, we're going to talk about
I really look forward to I'm so excited. I really look forward to connecting with all of you. I took a screenshot of your email and number. You can expect to hear from me. I emailed you, Huda and Yoshua Worthy. I am very serious about this because this is the second time I'm doing it. The first time that I went to look for help was when I was already in burnout stage. I did it for 4 years straight, got way too many clients, and I was completely burned out. And then I started looking for help. So this time I'm trying to do it smart. We're looking for help in the first place.
Well, good luck to you. I'm here to help.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. And I look forward to speaking with you guys next week.
Have an amazing week, guys. See you next week.
Take care. All the best.